Welcome to the Society Pod, a podcast for entrepreneurs, marketers, and leaders. Here's your host, Jessica Yarmy.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Society Pod. My guest today, she's been in the franchising world for the past 10 years, but then prior to franchising, she was in creative, marketing, event creation. So we're going to have a ton of things to talk to today. Welcome to the show, Katie Schaeffers.
Thanks, Jessica. Great to be here.
So you have done so many different things. How do you normally introduce yourself when you're meeting somebody new?
Well, that's a great question. These days, it's usually I'm Ace's mom. I have a 5-year-old, and so constantly balancing the mom life and the work life. But I think the way that I typically introduce myself today is I lead Schaeffers, which is a home detailing brand based in Vancouver, Canada. I'm building a great team of people who are working really hard to build the next big brand in home services.
We will definitely get into this mom life thing because my boy is 15. But let's start with Schaeffers. What makes Schaeffers so special?
Schaeffers is a unique concept in one way and a concept we've seen lots of times in another way. I think home services is having kind of a unique moment right now. I was just at the IFA conference this week and met so many other fantastic franchise leaders who are also working in the home services space. One of the things that I think makes Schaeffers really unique is we take care of the whole home. So we talk about taking care of all the outside of people's houses, exterior home maintenance, whether that's your windows, your gutters, pressure washing. We hang Christmas lights. It's not just about delivering that transactional service. It's really about taking care of people's biggest investment. For so many of us, our homes are our greatest asset, our greatest investment. And so we're really trying to revolutionize that space where we say we take care of your whole home and we make it easy. We set it and forget it. We offer a membership subscription service for our services, and we really care deeply about taking care of people's homes.
I love that it's a one-stop shop because you end up calling one person for Christmas lights, another person for windows. You know, you kind of have your staff of different people that you call for different things. So I think it's great that it's all in one. It is a franchise structure, but I'm definitely used to like brick and mortar kind of address-based franchise. How is a service-based franchise different than a brick and mortar franchise?
I think there's a couple things that make it different. One thing that we find is a lower kind of barrier to entry. When you think about brick and mortar, you often think about rent and build outs and the sort of real estate component of it. We don't have any of that at Schaeffers as a kind of fully mobile based business. When you start at Schaeffers, you start with one van and a couple of team members. And so we find it's lower cost to entry for lots of people, but it also is kind of a faster ramp up. We can get people in market once you've got your deal signed and we put you through our training. We can get you open and in market sometimes in as little as 12 weeks. And so for people who are really hungry to get started, it's often a faster on-ramp.
That's a crazy fast on-ramp because typically in brick and mortar, you give like a 12-month on-ramp of location selection, location build out, like all of the things that can be delayed in construction. So to take 12 months down to 12 weeks is crazy fast. How many franchisees do you currently have in your system? And then are there any growth numbers that you want to share for 2026 and beyond?
We have just over 40 locations today across the US and Canada, and we're really excited about growth right now. We've been focused over the last couple of years since I came into the business in this position, really on shoring up our internal systems, making sure that our existing franchise partners were happy, healthy, growing, profitable. We've been really focused on unit economics, marketing costs. We spent the better part of the last couple of years really focused internally, and now we're ready to grow again. And so really spending lots of time thinking about market expansion and what the next kind of era of growth looks like for Schaeffers.
And that's super smart to make sure the current owners are happy and performing well, so you have a solid foundation to build from. As you're in Canada and then franchising down into the US, my background is like franchising in the US and then going up to Canada. How does it differ for you as a Canadian-based brand coming down and franchising in the US?
And there's the typical sort of regulatory environment, how we approach things in Canada, slightly different to the sort of regulatory environment in the US, but I wouldn't describe it as dramatically different. In fact, what we're seeing in the US is obviously with a larger population, with different climates, we're a very seasonal business. For us in Canada, it's actually a little bit harder because we're operating in some climates that have colder weather, more snow, these kinds of things where we can't be as operational at different times of the year. And so we're actually seeing in the US that there's certain markets, particularly Florida, Texas, southern states, that we're seeing significant growth in and even faster acceleration because the climate is really advantageous for a seasonal business like ours.
You have seasonal trends, you have consumer trends. What trends do you kind of like keep your eyes on as you're reading through publications?
One of the things that I always look for when I'm thinking about trends, transformation, innovation within our business is, are those trends relevant to us? Because it's so easy to sometimes read these publications or look at consumer reports and go, okay, this is happening in this space. We need to chase that trend. One of the things that I take really seriously in my role as a brand leader is this good for us? Is it good for our franchise partners? Not just, is it what customers want? By the same token, sometimes what you see in consumer trends is customers are telling you exactly what they want, and you need to kind of chase that trend. And so I think it is important to balance that, to say, is it good for the customer, and is it good for us? Is it good for the brand and for franchise partners? In terms of some of the trends I'm paying attention to right now, one of them is really the rise of home services. We see the kind of proliferation of home services. We see customers wanting more sort of set it and forget it type services. We see people wanting to take even better care of their homes, again, as their kind of greatest investment and greatest asset. We see the rise of things like subscription services to make it really easy to take care of things. So I think those are some of the things on the consumer side I'm really paying a lot of attention to. In terms of some of the trends in franchising, I mean, just overall, I see the rise in franchising. Again, at IFA this week, we were talking about the sheer number of franchise brands across the US, somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 franchise brands. I mean, it's significant. So I think that gives me lots of confidence that franchising is a powerful platform for people to grow their businesses and, achieve their dreams. And then I think the last one is, I see a really powerful trend around women in franchising. I've connected with so many fantastic women leaders in franchising over even just the last couple of months. I see this really compelling kind of leadership story emerging for so many of us.
I love the trend of women in franchising, obviously.
Not surprising.
Right. Go figure. But I think it's just such a natural business model for collaborative, kind of team-based female energy to thrive. And it really seems like it needs to catch up, if anything. The percentage of female franchise owners needs to be more, let alone franchisor leaders. We need more representation at the top. And that's part of the reason I do this podcast, is just to introduce my audience to people like you who made their way in the franchising business model, which has been very male dominated, but can be so successful for females to get into. I love that you're passionate about female founders and female entrepreneurs, and now sitting in a seat where you can not only represent women in leadership positions, but then also educate women who want to get into a franchise specifically. If you were to talk to a female in general who's interested in entrepreneurship, what advice do you share? And then maybe specifically someone who's interested in franchising as a baby step into entrepreneurship, what advice do you share?
It's such an important question. As I grow as a leader and as I work with other young women and people on my team or people that I mentor, I think one of the things that's so important and has served me so well is getting really clear on your own value system. What do you care about as a leader or as an emerging leader? What matters to you? How do you want to show up as a leader? How can you model the way? And that's really been my orientation, is I want to model the way. And so other women coming into their careers or at a particular juncture in their careers can say, I can see it. I can see someone who's done it before me, and I see how they do it. I think one of the things that can happen sometimes for women is what they model is what they see, which is, to get ahead, I have to behave in a certain way, or I have to model this more sort of male-dominated space that I'm in. But I think what I've been able to learn and demonstrate in my career is you can do it your way. It starts with really figuring out what your way is. And so if you get really clear on what your own values are, then you can demonstrate those in whatever setting that you're in.
I love that you're starting with values. And I think even as someone might be evaluating a franchise, to your point, there's 4,000 different franchises that you could be a part of. How do you narrow it down to a handful that you end up going and like talking to face. It's interesting because there's now a full business model around getting people into the franchise business model. And I think a lot of times the matchmaking maybe happens based on dollars or based on balance sheets. I think you're really correct with conversation should start with values and how do you, as Katie, run your franchise? What are your philosophies as a leader? Because that's going to then dictate for a franchisee how their week flows. What kind of leader are they getting in line with? It's a great call out to encourage anyone, whether you're getting into entrepreneurship on your own or you're getting into entrepreneurship via a franchise, is just to have that self-reflection and that clarity around who you are as a person.
And don't get me wrong, unit economics, you got to know your numbers, right? Whether that's, again, as a leader or as someone evaluating a franchise, the numbers don't lie. There has to be alignment there. There has to be visibility there. There has to be transparency there. Particularly for women leaders, it's, I think, sometimes something we sort of shy away from, and I don't totally know why. Being the authority on your area of expertise is something so essential for so many women that I connect with in a variety of different roles and positions. They're sort of afraid to take that subject matter expertise and say, I have domain expertise here. I think a big part of that is understand your numbers, to know the economics of your business, to be clear about where the benefits are. Going back to the values piece, I say this to my team, I say this to franchisees all the time. If we are goal aligned and we're values aligned, we can almost do anything, right? We can get through anything together, but we have to be goal aligned. We have to be values aligned. And so we spend a lot of time when we're bringing new franchisees into Shackshine, we spend a lot of time on the values piece. In so many cases, our franchise partners are taking this big leap of business ownership, in many cases for the first time. So we want to make sure that we are aligned at that values level because we're going to be doing business together for quite a while. Our values are so critical to us at Shackshine. Our team lives and breathes those values every day. And so we want to make sure we're welcoming partners into the business that share those values.
So then give me some details on your vetting process. What's the flow of like how you evaluate a potential franchise owner? And then are there specific demographics of a typical franchisee who might come in and be interested in joining Shackshine?
We have a name for our persona, our kind of top franchise partner, what they look and feel like. We call them the business athlete. This is somebody who is highly coachable, but also driven and competitive, somebody that understands how to work with a team, somebody that is trying to be kind of 1% better every day. And that combination of business acumen and that sort of athletic competitiveness and team spirit is something that we see in our existing franchise partners and for the people we're bringing into the business. Those are the people who really thrive at Shackshine. We're still an emerging brand in a way. We're still fairly young as a business. The people who want to grow with us really are the ones who are most successful. The other thing we use is something called 4H. And the 4Hs are happy, hungry, hands-on, and hardworking. And those are the things that we look for in people. The most important ones I find are happy. This is a happy brand and we want to work with happy people. And the other one is hands-on. This is a business where we really want to work with owner-operators, people that are in the trucks with their teams, really hands-on in the business. It isn't an investor model. This is really a place where you want to come and build the business yourself. That's where we start. Those are the kinds of candidates that we look for. Those are the people that we want to welcome into the business. And then from there, we take people through a really standard kind of sales cycle. We introduce them to other franchisees. We make sure that they get an opportunity to talk to other people in the business. We go through a fairly extensive due diligence process. We want to see how they approach business planning, how they look at how they want to build and scale their business over time. And then we invite them to our head office in Vancouver for a discovery day. And hopefully at the end of that, we're awarding them a franchise.
That's a very detailed process. So I'm not surprised you're out there thriving. You kind of mentioned the business athlete model or persona. Are you an athlete yourself?
I am an athlete in the sense that I'm running around after a 5-year-old. We play tennis together as a family. I love to get to the gym, try and, strike that balance in terms of where I go and relieve my stress and take some time for myself. I think the athletic persona shows up mostly for me in that competitive spirit. I'm a person who, that sort of idea of 1% compounding every day gets you to exponential growth. So I spend a lot of time thinking about mindset and, how I can show up differently as a leader, as a mom, as a friend, as a daughter, kind of every day trying to be that 1% better.
So where does that growth mindset come from for you? Because you do hear in athletics, you kind of get that ingrained in you from a really young age. But now here you are, you're living mom life and franchise leadership life, and you're approaching all of it with this growth mindset. So where did it start for you?
Yeah, it started with my dad. So my dad's an entrepreneur. I grew up seeing him running his business. I remember him having a little home office in our house. And so we got to see him running his business kind of all day, every day. It wasn't like he left the house and he was working in some big office building downtown. He was really growing his business in our house. And so observing him, watching him, seeing his drive was really inspiring to me. And he brought a lot of the sort of discipline of business ownership to me and my siblings. I always joke, I had a budget when I was 13. This idea of sort of financial responsibility, growing something yourself, being part of something bigger, helping other people realize their dream of business ownership was really instilled in me from a really young age with my dad.
So what was your first entrepreneurial venture?
It's kind of an embarrassing one, but I love to tell this story. So as a kid in the summer, you think about sort of typical, lemonade stands and these kinds of things, but I was a big collector of Archie comics as a kid. I had an Archie comic lending library. That was my first entrepreneurial venture at our cottage in the summer. I would lay out all my Archie comics and I made this lending library and people could come and borrow a book for 25 cents. Of course, you could get an actual Archie comic up the street at the corner store for like 50 cents, right? So I had good margins. I was always sort of cooking up these ideas with my siblings. And yeah, my Archie comics lending library I was about 8 years old, I think, when that bright idea came to fruition.
So when we were talking about trends and, what you kind of pay attention to externally, a lot of people might think about environmental trends or like competitive space. And you really kind of answered a lot like consumer focused and in your consumer trends and like who your people are and what they want. And then in your LinkedIn, you lead with the fact that I'm consumer obsessed. I'm assuming that comes from your marketing mind. How do you get to that? How does being consumer obsessed impact your day-to-day in running your franchise?
Customer obsession to me is so much more than just kind of customer satisfaction. I think anybody who, operates in any kind of brand or customer facing kind of B2C business, it's kind of table stakes. You want to make sure that your customers are having a great experience. For me, where customer obsession differs and why it's so important to me is it's really about delivering on that exceptional experience for the customer every single time at every single touch point. But it's also about going to where the customer is and making decisions based on what's good for that customer. Practically what that looks like in our business right now is I'm talking to customers every other week. I get my sales team to pull me a list of people that just signed up for a membership at Shackshine and I give them a call and I thank them for their business and I want to know why they chose Shackshine, why they chose memberships. I want to understand what was hard for them, what was easy for them, how we can make the service better for them. And so I spend a lot of time talking to customers, the kind of end user, our residential homeowner. But I also, as a franchisor, our franchise partners are also our customers. They're buying a business from us. And so I spend equally as much time with our franchise partners. I go out in the field, I talk to franchise partners, I talk to their teams, our technicians. And again, same thing. I want to learn what's hard for them. What could make the business better? What are they seeing? What are they observing? I can't have all the answers. They have so many of the answers. And so it's about taking that breadth of understanding and experience that you get from customers, franchise partners, and their teams. And then my job is really to synthesize that and go, okay, what are the right choices that are good for the business and good for customers? And that does, it comes from my marketing background. It comes from working with and for some incredible brands over the last 20 years of my career and seeing how powerful it is when you deliver the right, great experience to the customer, how it delights them, how they want to stay with your brand, how they talk about your brand, how it benefits both the business and the customer. Happy customers stay. Loyal customers drive great retention. Great retention equals a great business. It's all interconnected for me, but it really does come back to that idea that the customer holds a lot of the answers for what great innovation could look like for your business.
And for that reason, to me, it seems like marketing is the perfect pipeline to get to leadership, but it is not as common maybe as you would think. And so usually the marketing career stops at a CMO level, and you really kind of jumped right through that level and got to full leadership space. And so how important do you feel like it was to have your marketing background, your brand background, your customer obsession kind of background as your stepping stones into this leadership role?
I think it's been hugely important and influential. And I think you're right. I mean, I see it too. There's the path of a marketer typically goes to that CMO or, chief growth officer type of role, which are incredible, influential roles in organizations. Don't get me wrong, but I think where my marketing and certainly the customer background, I think this is maybe sometimes the other thing that gets misconstrued is we think about marketing sort of purely as the marketing funnel with the end point being that conversion moment. But marketing is so much broader than that when you think about all the components of how we interact with customers, brand positioning, understanding customer demographics, understanding, again, the sort of economics of the business. Great marketer should be connected to all of those things. I think in particular too, when you're working with a very customer-centric brand that cares really deeply about delivering a great experience for customers, I think it's a really natural fit for a marketer or somebody really focused on customer strategy to take over the leadership of that brand. Don't get me wrong, were there things I had to learn stepping into a brand leadership role or skills I had to sharpen? Absolutely. I had good financial acumen around the business. I've been a P&L owner for many years, but it's a different scope to take over, a full P&L for an entire business. Building more depth around legal, around operations, around technology. Those are all things that I had to really dive into deeply to be able to shore up my kind of breadth of skills to take on this role. My sense of sort of curiosity and drive. I love to learn new things. And so that didn't feel scary. It actually felt really exciting to be able to kind of take that strong base of marketing leadership that I had and bring in some of these other skills.
So now you have all of this breadth of skill. What would you say within that breadth is your superpower?
I think it's two things. The ability to connect with a customer and connect with a trend and then elevate that trend into a real business opportunity is kind of core to my superpower, my capabilities. I care a lot about what is happening in the marketplace, and then to be able to sort of synthesize what I see and go, this is the moment. You always have two choices. You can either be early or late. You can't not act. And so spotting those trends, understanding where the industry is going, where our business is going, listening to customers and saying, okay, what's right for our business? I think the second part of that, which is related, is storytelling. So much of business, even if you're in a, very data-driven or finance-driven role, your ability to storytell around the data, around what you're seeing, around what's important in your industry is essential. When I look sort of back in the rearview mirror in my career, I go, that sort of golden thread has always been about storytelling. How do you take lots and lots of information and synthesize it in a way that your audience can interpret it and digest it and action it?
Maybe specifically about how you lead. How would you describe your leadership style or your leadership philosophy as you're growing this franchise brand and the team that supports the franchise brand?
The first for me is have a clear vision. One of my most important jobs as a leader is to help people see where we're going. And if I have that clarity, then I can help bring that clarity to them. And so that's really kind of step one for me, is have a really clear vision. The next is have really clear goals. And vision and goals are different for me. Vision is the future. Where are we headed? And then goals are how we're going to measure our progress towards that vision. And then the third piece is building a great team that can help execute against that vision and goals. My team are credible leaders in their own right, and I care a lot about developing them to be even better. And so building a great team, making sure that they feel like a cohesive leadership team, making sure that they understand, again, where we're going, but also the role that they play in that is really critical for me as a leader. And then how we bring that to our franchise community. They also need to see the vision, understand the goals, and understand understand the path to how we get there. And then the last piece for me is really just about being human. We kind of bring our whole selves to work. I don't believe in work-life balance. I don't think it exists. I think you're constantly navigating the poles in different directions. And so I want my team to be able to live their lives in a way that is in alignment for what they need, whether they have young families, aging parents, hobbies and things outside of work. I want to create the environment where people can do both.
That's awesome. I think the not believing in work-life balance conversation is important. It goes along with our mom life conversation. Sticking with you in your current role in your leadership seat, you've been with the same company for 10 years or over 10 years, and you maybe went from being peers with some of the people you now lead. And so how was that transition? Was there any turbulence in that transition, or did you have enough equity built up with your peers that they were fully on board with you stepping up as the leader?
I think there's a lot to be said for longevity in a business. I see more and more now people jumping between roles to elevate their career versus staying within one organization. I'm somewhat biased given the path that I've chosen, but I do believe that depth of experience within an organization allows you to build credibility over time. And so because I've worked across lots of different roles and even across different brands of ours, I think I've been able to build that credibility over time, build trust with people, both my leadership team as well as people that reported into me or perhaps my peers and colleagues. For me, the proof is always in the pudding. And so if I've been able to deliver over time, over different roles, and been able to build trust and build relationships, I think I was able to leverage that as I stepped into this leadership role to say, I had so many great deep connections across our organization that I was able to leverage. Now, that being said, any transition brings potential turbulence. Navigating that, saying goodbye to some team members that maybe didn't fit the future vision of the business, bringing on new team members to try and build towards that future that I saw for the business. I think one of the single hardest things that we have to do as leaders is navigate people, different choices, making sure you have the right people in the right seats to be able to deliver on the goals that you have. So absolutely, there were challenging times. I've parted ways with people that I cared really deeply about and had to make difficult decisions along the way, but ultimately in service of building a stronger team, a stronger business, and ultimately delivering on a great experience for our customers and our franchise partners.
It's super hard.
I always say this to people who are like, I'm ready for my next role and I want to lead people. I'm like, it's the hardest job you'll ever have. It's truly the hardest job you'll ever have.
It's super hard.
So incredibly rewarding when you see your people thriving, when you see people being elevated within your business. I work with one of my colleagues who's also been in Schaeffers for a number of years, and he's also grown his career quite considerably, and most recently took on a really exciting leadership role directly on my leadership team. And just to watch him thrive and grow in this business is so rewarding. And to have even a fraction of input, in that journey for him is incredibly rewarding.
So what's your proudest Shack Shine moment to date?
There's been so many. The thing that I feel most proud of today, I'm hesitating because I feel like I'm still in the middle of it. And so I'm sort of experiencing this in real time, is when I took over the leadership of the business 3 years ago, we were in a tough spot as a business. We had a period of really accelerated growth, and then we had a period of plateau, and then we were actually having a period of time where we were seeing people exit the business, where we needed to, again, really kind of shore up our internal systems. But I came into this role at that time and I had a mountain in front of me to climb. I had lots of support. I had a clear vision for what I believed was the right thing to be doing in the business, but I had a lot of hurdles to cross to be able to start to realize that vision. We are largely through that challenging time now. We have a really clear path forward for what success looks like for our business. We have really engaged franchise partners. And so I think this sort of turnaround that we've orchestrated over the past 2 years. Again, I say I'm still in the middle of it because I don't think we're done. I don't think we're ever done, but the business looks and feels very different today than it did 3 years ago. And I feel really proud of that.
And there will be more wins to come for sure when you approach it with that attitude. I want to circle back to mom life, your comment about there's no such thing as work-life balance. You need to have some balance somewhere. So if you don't believe in work-life balance, how do you achieve a semblance of balance in your day-to-day or in your life in general?
I think maybe to clarify my comment about not believing in work-life balance, I don't think you ever get this sort of like 50-50 equilibrium in your life. I'm a person that can be like fairly intense about my goals and the things that I want to achieve. When I pick a direction, I tend to go, full force in that direction. And I've approached parenthood in kind of a similar way, which is when I'm in mom mode, I'm 100% in mom mode. And that means no cell phone, no computer, no notifications. I'm with my kid and my family. And then same thing at work. When I'm in work mode, I have a really supportive partner who helps me be able to do this, but it means I'm kind of full on in work mode. And so for me, it's less about the balance and more about how are you integrating these different components of your life and then structuring your life in such a way that you can do both. For me, that means like I do school drop off in the morning. My first call of the day can't be before 9 o'clock. And I've just structured my calendar in that way where that happens, that is the case. If something urgent comes up and I need to reschedule something, of course, I have the flexibility where I can do that. But for me, it's been about setting those really clear boundaries to say, this is when I'm in this mode, this is when I'm in this mode, and really being intentional about how I structure my day. You asked me earlier about what advice would I give to people, and this is not necessarily women or men, it could be anybody, is particularly when you become a parent, you have to have a plan. You can't just assume that you're going to be able to go back to your work life when everything's going to be the same. It's just simply not. And so having a plan, having a structure, setting those boundaries, creating a schedule, it feels all very administrative, but at the end of the day, it has to be so that you can continue to show up the way you want to in those different parts of your life. And so it was something my husband and I did as I was coming out of my maternity leave, a number of years ago, was how are we going to approach this? How can I continue to build my career in a way that's meaningful for me and for our family? How can he do the same thing? And then how can we show up for our son, make sure that he has the support and the structure and the love that of course that he needs and that we want to give him. So have a plan is probably my best advice.
And then be ready to evolve the plan, right?
We are very agile in our house. The plan gets adapted and iterated probably on a weekly basis.
We'll have to do a recap podcast at some point because my boy is now 15 and there used to be lines for me, like there used to be boundaries, and now it's all muddy. He edits videos for me. He knows exactly what a franchise is. Like he knows what franchise he would buy if he had the money. So he's in the world.
Awesome.
It just evolves. Every season has a different plan.
That's the other piece that's so cool for me too. And I think back again about my own experience with my dad, because he was at home, worked out of our house. I saw him building his business. And one of the things that is really important to me, even though my son's only 5, is I show him and I talk to him about what I do. The local Vancouver franchise here, the Shackshine franchise here, takes care of our home. And so he sees the Shackshine guys a few times a year at our house. And he knows mom works for Shackshine, and he loves to tell his schoolmates that. And when we see a Shackshine van on the road, he points it out. And that sort of integration is really important to me, that he knows that, mom has a big job and she loves it. And I love going to work every day, but I also love coming home and having dinner with him and watching a movie on Friday nights.
I would love to see the notes in your team's system for your customer account. Don't mess it up. She runs the business.
So funnily enough, I got a sneak peek into that the other day because I was out in the field with our Vancouver franchise. We're in the middle of building a mobile app for our technicians right now where they can capture photos and information about different customers' homes. Our Vancouver franchise had built a really cool little prototype of this, and I asked them to show me an example, and they showed me my own customer account, and right at the top it said, "This is the big boss." That's a great new nickname that I will happily adopt.
If you weren't the big boss at Shackshine, what would you be doing?
I have a dream of like running away to southern France and, having a little vineyard. And the way I get a little bit of that in my life today is I love to garden. So, I have this dream of sort of being a gardener and tending the land, and maybe a simpler life, a slower life, than the one that I have today. That's sort of always been on that vision board for the future, is being kind of part of the earth in a different way.
What I'm hearing is that Shackshine needs a master franchisee in the south of France so you could start to baby step toward that dream of yours.
Yes, for sure. I think the other thing for me, that the crossover between sort of gardening and running a business, is this idea of building, planting seeds, watching them grow, tending, pruning, what's not working, what is, moving some plants around, making sure that the right plants are next to each other, so that they grow effectively. I see lots of parallel in my love for gardening and my love for building. You asked me at the beginning of our conversation, how would I introduce myself? And I said, brand leader and Ace's mom. But I think at the heart of it is that sort of building, gardening philosophy is I love to grow stuff. And whether that's growing stuff in my garden, growing my family, growing this business, that is the thing that drives me.
We are close to out of time, and I think this is an appropriate way to close it out, because when you are gardening, you're going to plant a whole bunch of things, and sometimes they die. Sometimes there are fails. Close us out with a time where you had a setback or a fail, something that you were planting just didn't make it. And so what's your recovery process? What's your comeback season through a fail?
I think if you aren't failing, you're not learning. I wouldn't go so far as to say I attempt to fail, but I certainly embrace failure and to say, acknowledge it early, learn, and then what am I going to do differently next time? And there are any number of examples I could share with you where I've made the wrong decision, hired the wrong person, said the wrong thing, spent the wrong money on the wrong thing. There's any number of experiences that I could share there, but the heart of it for me is recognize it fast, acknowledge it quickly, take accountability for it, analyze the lesson, and then do something differently the next time. That to me is the framework for success. Every time you fail, it's an opportunity to do better the next time.
And that is why she's the big boss lady. Thank you so much for everything you shared with us today. This has been a complete pleasure. I think you've added a lot of value to the audience. And if you guys want to find Katie or more information about Shackshine, I will link all of the information into the show notes. Thank you so much for being with us here today on the Society Pod.
Thanks, Jessica. This was great.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Society Pod.